Jimmy Kimmel is America's poster child for all idiotic political discourse. Long ago, Jimmy Kimmel ditched comedy in favor of smug lectures and clapter and fake tears. He's not funny. He's not clever. He's just an annoying left-wing agitprop creator.
So Ben Shapiro just delivered a masterclass in dissecting dangerous political rhetoric. And it's exactly what we need right now. He's connecting Jimmy Kimmel's conspiracy theories to actual assassination attempts with documented evidence. We're breaking down his framework for identifying genuinely dangerous speech versus normal political discourse.
Why is political violence exploding in the country? And why is the bulk of it coming from the left? Yes, not the right, the left. Well, it might have something to do with the mainstream left embracing terror supporters, conspiracy theorists, and people who justify murder.
This Wall Street Journal data is crucial because even mainstream outlets can't ignore the trend anymore. Since 2021, we've seen campus violence, pro-Hamas demonstrations turning violent, and attacks on government officials, overwhelmingly from leftist actors. The data speaks for itself.
Okay, now, we do have information, a lot of information about where this is coming from these days. And the answer is mostly the political left. So the Wall Street Journal has a big story today about the political orientation of the perpetrators of domestic attacks targeting the United States government. These statistics, by the way, are wildly skewed in favor of the left. In favor of the left. I mean, the way you can tell this, by the way, is look at the year 2020. If you look at the year 2020 on this particular graph, it actually shows more right-wing attacks against the government than left-wing attacks. No. Okay, the year 2020 featured the BLM riots, which were large-scale attacks on law enforcement all over the United States. And yet somehow the right sort of outnumbers the left on this particular chart. But even the Wall Street Journal, using these bad stats from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, shows left-wing extremist violence outnumbering right-wing extremist violence in 2025.
The 2020 BLM riots caused over $2 billion in damage and killed dozens, yet they're barely counted as left-wing attacks. Meanwhile, January 6 gets classified as the worst threat to democracy ever. The methodology is designed to hide left-wing violence in plain sight.
They're wildly wrong because these stats ignore the fact that, for example, the attempt to burn alive the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, in the governor's mansion was perpetrated by a Free Palestine extremist, meaning a member of the left. But according to the Wall Street Journal, perpetrators often don't fit into neat categories. Some attacks on U.S. political figures, like the one on Democratic Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, whose residence was set on fire last April, were allegedly motivated by events abroad. Well, I'm confused. Is motivation by events abroad foreign to American politics? I think not. Okay, bottom line is, absolutely, 100%, there is a problem on the left.
That events abroad classification is genius propaganda. Pro-Hamas terrorists firebombing a governor's mansion becomes foreign motivated rather than domestic left-wing terrorism. It's how they've hidden the wave of anti-Israel violence targeting American officials and Jewish communities since October 7th.
And again, I point to the fact that the latest Trump would-be assassin called the president a pedophile, a rapist, and a traitor. In a second, we'll get more into the violent speech of the left. What kind of rhetoric is appropriate? When is it appropriate? Is all this rhetoric kind of the same?
The shooter's manifesto literally parroted mainstream media talking points, calling Trump a pedophile, rapist, and traitor. These weren't fringe conspiracy theories. They were repeated nightly on late-night TV, CNN, and MSNBC for years. The connection is undeniable.
So, I want to discuss three basic standards when it comes to political speech in the United States. First, there is the illegal. There actually is illegal political speech in the United States. If you say, I want to go kill the president of the United States, that's illegal. It's incitement. Right? It's either incitement or it's an active threat. Right? It came out of your mouth, so it's a form of speech, but it is also an active threat. If I say you should go kill the president of the United States, that would be under the Brandenburg test. That's a Supreme Court piece of precedent. That would be incitement and illegal. Incitement under that test is any speech that is intended to and likely to incite imminent lawless action.
The Brandenburg Standard requires imminent lawless action, meaning immediate and specific threats. Most political rhetoric doesn't meet this bar. But what we're seeing now is a systematic campaign to dehumanize opponents as existential threats, which creates the permission structure for violence.
Then there is typical inflammatory rhetoric. This would be stuff like fight, fight, fight. Or, for example, the Sarah Palin map of districts back in 2010 or so that targeted particular congressional districts. One of those districts that was targeted was the district of Gabby Giffords, and the left tried to claim that because of that map, somebody tried to shoot Gabby Giffords. That's silly. That's silly. And when people say we need to go to war with the Democrats or we need to go war with the Republicans, is that the sort of thing that is going to lead to actual violence? No, because that sort of rhetoric is pretty typical in politics. A normal inflammatory rhetoric. And we should not conflate that with incitement.
The Palin-Giffords narrative was completely debunked. The shooter was schizophrenic with no political motivation. Yet that fake connection dominated headlines, while actual left-wing rhetoric inspiring real violence gets memory hold. The double standard couldn't be more obvious.
And then there is the permission structure for violence we have been talking about a lot over the course of the last couple of years. That's the stuff that's truly dangerous. This is the conspiracism, the justification of violence. This is how you get to crazy people thinking the president is a pedophile, meaning a threat to children, a rapist, meaning a threat to women, and a traitor, meaning a threat to the country, and in charge of all of the systems of power, and therefore can only be stopped through violence. Right? That's the sort of stuff that we are talking about as truly, truly dangerous.
That permission structure is exactly how radicalization works. When mainstream figures repeatedly call someone an existential threat to democracy, children, and women, unstable individuals conclude violence is justified self-defense. It's textbook stochastic terrorism, disguised as political commentary.
I think Jimmy Kimmel is awful. I think he is terrible. I think he's been terrible for over a decade, like well over a decade. The first time I got in a public spat with Jimmy Kimmel is when he was defending socialized medicine on the basis that his child had an open heart surgery at Children's Hospital in LA. And he did a very weepy monologue on his show about that. I was less than sympathetic because my child had had a similar open heart surgery from the exact same surgeon, and that did not make me an expert on the healthcare system. What makes you an expert is actually knowing things. So I think Jimmy Kimmel's been terrible at his job for years. I think that he has surrendered laughter in favor of clapter, applause from his left-wing friends. So if Jimmy Kimmel were to get fired, I would shed 0 tears. 0. I think that he is a propagandist. I do not think that he is funny. I think that he has sort of betrayed his audience in surrendering humor in favor of left-wing agitprop.
This perfectly captures the difference between genuine expertise and emotional manipulation. Using personal tragedy to push policy without understanding the complexities is classic progressive tactics. Facts matter more than feelings, but late-night TV operates on the opposite principle.
But getting Jimmy Kimmel for saying what he said on Thursday is like getting Al Capone for tax evasion. You're hitting him with the wrong charge. So let's reverse time for a second. Thursday night is before the latest assassination attempt on the president. Jimmy Kimmel did a White House Correspondents' Dinner spoof. It is not funny. It is not entertaining. It is incredibly stupid. And he makes a joke about Melania being an expectant widow.
The timing here is crucial. This joke aired just days before another assassination attempt. But the larger point stands. The real damage comes from years of conspiracy theories, not tasteless jokes. We need to focus on the actual dangerous rhetoric.
I do not think that it is a call to violence. I do not think that Jimmy Kimmel is saying someone should shoot the president there. I think that what Jimmy Kimmel was joking about was the idea, which is egregious enough, that Melania hates the president, would be happy if he were dead, could inherit his wealth. I think that's what Kimmel is actually doing in that joke, which is pretty disgusting, but is not in fact a call to violence. And in a second, I'm going to explain why Kimmel should have been fired long ago, actually.
This intellectual honesty is refreshing. Rather than taking the easy shot at the obvious target, he's identifying the real problem. The conspiracy theories and character assassination campaigns are what actually radicalize people, not crude jokes about marriage.
Jimmy Kimmel has spent years at this point calling the president a pedophile. He has imputed Epstein involvement to him. Again, that is the thing in the actual shooter's manifesto. It's actually in the manifesto. I don't have to speculate because he released a manifesto. Well, here's Jimmy Kimmel doing that for like a long time.
This is the smoking gun. documented evidence linking mainstream media conspiracy theories to actual violence. The shooter didn't get his ideas from obscure forums. He got them from network television, repeated for years without consequences.
So, again, it was Jimmy Kimmel calling Trump a cover-up artist for pedophilia and a rapist and all the rest, which is the permission structure for the violence. That is the permission structure for the violence. So, should Jimmy Kimmel lose his job? He should have lost his job long ago because he's crappy at his job. But if we're going to talk specifically about the kinds of rhetoric that need to be called out, that should have social consequences, conspiracism, anti-evidence idiocy that imputes evil to an opponent without evidence.
Exactly right. The permission structure was built systematically through years of unfounded accusations. When you convince someone their opponent is literally evil and poses an existential threat, violence becomes the logical conclusion. That's how radicalization actually works.
And again, I'm not blaming Melania for being deeply upset with that joke from last week, because obviously you hear that joke and time flattens and then somebody tries to shoot your husband, you might be a little ticked, and you should be ticked. But let's be real about the kinds of rhetoric that actually we all should be fighting. I mean, Democrat and Republican, we all should be fighting, because here's the thing. We have to have some common standard when it comes to the kinds of speech that receive social blowback and social consequence. Otherwise, it just turns into a war of all against all.
Without consistent standards, we get selective enforcement that protects left-wing conspiracy theories while punishing conservative speech. The result is more radicalization, not less. Equal application of standards is the only way forward.
I think Americans agree that conspiracism is bad and wrong and generates violence. I think that the vast majority of Americans, left, right, and center, agree that if you impute to your political opponents evil without evidence, that foments violence. But if you conflate that with jokes you don't like, or you conflate that with kind of inflamed political rhetoric about how you're going to fight an electoral war, how you're going to go to battle, as though that is what's actually... Again, there's very specific lines of thought that generate violence. And we should pick those out, and we should be specific.
This framework actually works. Evidence-based accusations? Fine. Conspiratorial character assassination? Dangerous. Normal political combat metaphors? Acceptable. The specificity allows us to distinguish legitimate criticism from dangerous dehumanization campaigns.
Specificity is what allows for agreement and change. Generality just turns everything into a war of all against all.
That's the roadmap right there. Instead of vague calls to tone down rhetoric, we need specific evidence about who's pushing conspiracy theories and creating permission structures for violence. Kimmel is Exhibit A for how mainstream media radicalizes people.